Well, let's get caught up on the weather as we head into the month of October. Joining us now, Eric Stodgrass with Nutrient Ag Solutions. Eric, good to talk with you again as we take a look at what's going on with the weather. Of course, I would be remiss if I did not start and mention the devastating impacts from Hurricane Helene, Tropical Storm Helene. I mean, just the pictures and video that we've seen here over the last several days has just been horrible to take a look at, Eric.
Yeah, that was our worry all along, was that we had a system that came through the Midwest that was going to take what was left of Helene and kind of curl it around over the Midwest, which meant instead of just leaving the coast, it was going to hit it was going to hit the Appalachian Mountains, the Blue Ridge, the Smokies, almost perpendicular. And so, about a week ago, we said, hey, the flooding risk here is huge. 15 to 20 inches of rain is possible with this pushing up against the Appalachian Mountains, really the Blue Ridge and the Smokies. And that's where a lot of these devastating videos have come from. I'm be honest, it's been a long time since I've seen flooding of that caliber in that area. And it'll be months long to clean this up. And that's why we will likely see the retirement of Hurricane Helene's name. It'll come off the name list because of its devastation here. And certainly just cost. And by the way, it wasn't there. Most of Georgia, you then come into parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, parts of Arkansas, Missouri, southern Ohio. In fact, we had winds here in Champaign, where I live. We cracked 50 miles an hour. I had huge tree branches down in my backyard. Spent Saturday cleaning up. And I mean, I'm not comparing damage here, but I'm just saying that's how far north the damage got from these strong winds from this tropical system. And it's still spinning over the mid-Atlantic today. But I'll be honest, Jesse, if you didn't get moisture from Helene across the rest of the country, there was nothing else to be had. We had one very weak system, not this weekend we just had, but the weekend before it, that brought in some rain. But other than that, we've been very, very dry. And I think the forecast is even drier going forward.
Yeah, and thinking about that dry forecast going forward, I know especially areas, the Western Corn Belt into the plains have been very dry. There's been some fire risk potential, I know, in parts of the plains, but harvest able to roll along in those areas with all the dry weather, Eric.
Yeah, and that was what was interesting. I got some messages this weekend from folks that were in the Western Plains, and they're like, "How dry has it been?" I'm like, "Well, I got 132 years worth of data, and many of our climate reporting districts in the Western Corn Belt and the Upper Midwest are the driest." Now, remember, you rewind the clock 2 months, and all we were talking about was the fact that it wouldn't stop raining in some places, or 3 months in those same areas. So they've had precipitation curves that went straight up and then flatlined ever since. So the Missouri Basin, parts of the Mississippi Basin, the Ohio Basin are still low, although the Mississippi River at Memphis is back up. It's 10 feet over where it was a week ago, mainly because of the rains from Helene. But the fire risk is going to continue to be high. And the story those guys were saying was, listen, it's super dry. I'm worried about it, but man, I'm getting stuff done fast, able to harvest quickly. But the risk of fire is high, especially today. We have very strong winds in the northern plains, western Corn Belt. Very, very dry air coming in behind that on those stronger winds. So they have red flag warnings painted up and down throughout the northern half of the plains. And then the back side of it in Washington, Idaho, Montana, we've already got freeze warnings out. We'll likely get 2 chances at frost over the next 7 days in the Western Corn Belt. Now, let me be very careful here. When I say Western Corn Belt, I'm not talking about Iowa. I'm not talking about Nebraska. I'm talking about way western Nebraska, the western sides of the Dakotas, and then the northern sides of the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin. So this is not penetrating all the way down into the central part of the Corn Belt, or what we generally just call the Western Corn Belt. But it's going to be dry, very dry air coming in with this frontal boundary that's going to get through in the next 48 hours or so. In fact, I think this front is moving faster than you can travel, except for by aircraft. But it's in Montana today. I expect it to be all the way in the Eastern Corn Belt by tomorrow afternoon or evening. I don't think you can drive that fast. It's really moving quickly.
Well, thinking about this and looking at the month of October and then thinking about winter ahead of us as well. And, when we think about this dry weather, I mean, some of the longer range models, how are they looking here over the next several weeks, Eric?
Yeah, dry. So the new European model that was released today for the midsection country is dry. The new CPC update, very dry for the midsection of the country. And the reason is this: all of the activity is starting in the Bering Sea, which is near Alaska, gets into the Gulf of Alaska, which is off the west coast of British Columbia, and it's going through Canada. And there's a big ridge tucked in the middle, which isn't opening the Gulf to bring in moisture. So we're actually watching the development of another tropical system around the Yucatan, but I think it's going to go toward Florida, not even make it into the southern tier of the United States. So the issue here is that until that pattern breaks down, I see very, very dry conditions going forward. And I was talking with some guys earlier last week in Indiana that said, hey, this dryness we had, for September probably took not just the top end off the yield, but took quite a bit away from what they were having, which was a great crop. So they'll be very curious as the combines roll what this did just to zap some of that moisture at the very end of the life cycle of these crops. So I look out there and all I have to say is this: La Nina is still trying to push. The ocean temperatures are cooling. The trade winds are about to speed back up again. That's all La Nina like behavior. And every long range forecast I see is that after a dry October, things get more active for the Ohio Valley. They get more active for the Pacific Northwest. And in between is the Western Corn Belt and the Northern Plains. And so we do think that there's going to be a legitimate chance for a winter, like a normal winter in that area. And the greatest risk of developing drought is going to be farther to the south and west. So based off what I have right now, I'd tell you that winter might be legit this year, but we have to undo the dryness in the soil before the soil freezes. Otherwise, as I normally say, you just get so dependent on the rainfall in March, April, and May to make up those deficits. So we don't want to carry drought from one year into the next. And I'm worried that that's going to happen given how dry these October forecasts are.
All right, Eric. How about South America? Let's talk there. Sounds like some spotty rain showers have started in Brazil, but again, spotty is what I'm hearing. What's kind of the latest outlook you're seeing as we roll into the month of October?
Yeah, I would give the same description. So we've had just a few pop-up storms, but no big supply of monsoonal moisture yet. They've not been able to overcome the big deficit in humidity that's in the midsection of Brazil. So the center west regions like Mato Grosso, we got a planting progress update there at like 0.5% planted. A year ago, they were nearly 5% planted. So the lack of early moisture has been an issue. So what do we see? Well, flooding in southern Brazil continues to be a major concern. I'm looking at wet conditions there. Some heavy rains in the northern parts of Argentina, but around Buenos Aires, over toward Cordoba, not too much in the terms of rainfall. But I'm curious as to whether or not the models have it right on the arrival of moisture in mid-October. You look at every model forecast, and if I was a Brazilian farmer, I'd be getting ready just to, I'd have everybody in my family sitting in a planter ready to go because some of the forecast models are suggesting October comes in wetter the second half. And I can make a case for that, but I would just tell you some of the models flip-flopping back and forth day in and day out have been a bit maddening. And I think that you have a lot of very cautious farmers right now not wanting to plant than having to replant because there's no germination or the seed just fails to establish. So I would just say this: Brazil is going to continue to be a part of a weather story that could add to other things in the markets, like buying news, like we saw last week, all sorts of stuff like that. And I think their planting pace over these next 4 weeks is going to be critical to understanding if we get any sort of a decent price reaction in the US. If the models are right, unfortunately, this is very bearish news. If they're right, if they're wrong, then you're going to start to see some positive movement if weather's going to be the big factor pushing it forward. So, yeah, watch Brazil carefully, or I'll watch it and tell you about it every Monday.
Sounds like a plan. Well, I know folks can go to agweather.com as well, ag-wx.com for more information. Eric Snodgrass with Nutrient Ag Solutions. Always good to catch up with you, my friend. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next week.
Yep, sounds good, Jesse.